Developing right now on Morning News Now, retaliation. This morning, China striking back with its own penalties against the U.S. as a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods in America takes effect. Now, President Trump doubling down with a message for Beijing: make concessions like Canada and Mexico or face the consequences.
That was just an opening salvo. If we can't make a deal with China, then the tariffs will be very, very substantial.
We have team coverage as fears of an all-out trade war grow and what that could mean for you. Also this morning, a new era at the southern border. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth making his first trip since his confirmation. And more uncertainty across several federal agencies as the Trump administration hints at a complete overhaul. We'll have the latest. Plus, critical clues in last week's deadly mid-air collision between an American Airlines jet and a Black Hawk helicopter. The work today that could shed light on the tragedy. And swipe left. Valentine's Day might be just around the corner, but an eye-opening new study may make you want to ditch dating apps for good. What researchers are saying about the impacts of online dating on mental health.
Might have to go old school.
Just in time
so I did it when I was young.
Yeah.
All right, good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. This morning, the United States and China appear to be inching closer to a trade war after Beijing revealed it would be retaliating against Washington tariffs with their own on U.S. goods. This was within minutes of the U.S.'s 10% tariff on Chinese imports coming into effect at midnight.
Beijing announced that it would impose tariffs of 15% on U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas, also 10% on other U.S. imports like crude oil and agricultural machinery. Beijing says those tariffs would go into effect on February 10th. That's next Monday. Despite this looming trade war with China, America's tariffs on Canada and Mexico appear to be on hold for now. Following a phone call with Canada's Prime Minister, Mr. Trump said he would pause tariffs for 30 days, citing Canada's plans to ramp up border security. It's important to note those border plans by Canada had actually been announced back in December. Yesterday morning, the president put a similar tariff delay on Mexico after speaking with his Mexican counterpart. She also told him that her country would be beefing up security at the southern border.
They've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country. And we're going to have a big negotiation with Mexico. I'll be involved, too, and President Sheinbaum will be involved to see whether or not we can work something out on the tariffs.
A lot to cover. Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer, who is in Beijing. Good morning to both of you. So, Janice, let's start with you. Walk us through these retaliatory tariffs China has announced. Which U.S. industries is China targeting?
Well, as President Trump stands down on Canada and Mexico, it seems to be heating up with China. Rapid-fire retaliation today from Beijing on multiple fronts. First, China is imposing additional tariffs of 10 to 15% on a range of U.S. imports, including coal, liquefied natural gas, crude oil, and farm machinery. It's also targeting some car imports, namely pickup trucks, and announced additional export controls on more than 24 critical metals. This is effective immediately. The tariffs, though, take effect on February 10th. The measures aren't seen as making a huge dent in the U.S. economy. Economists say it's more symbolic. The measures affect roughly 30% of U.S. exports to China. But they do seem designed to send a message from China that it could get a lot worse, in particular for red states. It's thought that China's leader, Xi Jinping, and President Trump were looking for a reset in relations. Xi sent his vice president to attend the inauguration. And that potential is still seen as being there. But on tariffs, Xi and the officials around him would not want to be seen as caving to President Trump, the U.S., or the West. So China was expected to hit back. Joe and Savannah.
Yeah, so Aaron, let's bring you in here and pick up right there. We understand President Trump is expected to speak with China's President Xi over the next few days. Were these retaliatory measures expected by the White House? And does it mean that we then see the Trump administration hit back again?
I think yes and yes. We knew over the weekend that the Chinese indicated that they would take steps to push back when these, if and when these tariffs from the U.S. went into effect, that they would challenge the tariffs in the World Trade Organization in sort of a court setting, and that they would take these steps that we now know they have taken. At the same time, We heard from President Trump yesterday that he intends to talk to the Chinese president. And so that could be a sign that there might be a deal to be made here, as we saw with Mexico and with Canada. At the same time, we know that the original executive order that was signed that put these tariffs on China did include a retaliation clause. And so it said that if China took action, then the U.S. could take additional actions. The sound you played from President Trump indicated as much as well. And we also heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio say on television last night that he felt like if China continued to cheat and steal, the words he used, then that there would be additional actions taken by the U.S. I think it's worth pointing out that sort of murkies the water here, because that seems to indicate something economic. At the same time, we know that these tariffs from the U.S. were originally put in place, at least according to the executive order, because the U.S. administration wanted to stop the flow of fentanyl and precursor drugs that come from China.
So, Janice, you've got the tariffs, but on top of that, China also announced it's going to open an investigation into Google, while adding certain U.S. companies to what it calls its unreliable entity list. So what is that? What does this all mean?
Well, it's an antitrust probe into Google, which is not the first for the company. It doesn't do a lot of business here because the search engine is obviously blocked, but it is disruptive for Chinese companies, and the government appears to be wanting to make a point. As well, two companies, PVH Group, which owns clothing brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, and Illumina, it's a gene sequencing startup. They're both being added to China's unreliable entity list here, meaning they're effectively blacklisted from doing business. So this reaction, again, coming from China on multiple fronts. The uncertainty now is whether this is all the preamble for negotiating tactics between these two huge economies, or whether it's the beginning of a deeper trade confrontation. President Trump has said that he plans to speak with President Xi. It isn't clear when or if that call is happening. But with both sides now looking for leverage in this, the signs seem to point to a bumpy road ahead. Joe and Savannah.
Aaron, we mentioned tariffs are on hold for Canada and Mexico. What happens next there?
Yeah, 1 month delay on the tariffs for Canada and Mexico after each of those countries indicated they would push back if the tariffs were applied to them. At the same time, these leader phone calls happened just yesterday, where President Trump spoke with the Mexican president and the Canadian prime minister and decided that some concessions would be made, that the Mexicans would send 10,000 troops to their northern border to deal with the flow of undocumented migrants and the flow of drugs as well. The Mexicans said the U.S. Had agreed to start working on trying to prevent high-powered weapons from crossing into Mexico. The Canadians, for their part, saying that they would spend upwards of $1 billion on border security via additional helicopters and personnel, as well as some technology being used there. They would create a position of a fentanyl czar in the Canadian government. Those are all things that seem to be enough to create this pause, although the White House is saying that they'll be evaluating this along the way. They'll have Secretary of State Rubio, as well as several other secretaries, continuing negotiations with both Canada and Mexico. Savannah, Joe?
We'll see if we're right back here a month from now. Aaron, Janice, thank you both.
Well, some federal government workers are on edge this morning as President Trump and his billionaire right hand, Elon Musk, attempt to dismantle multiple federal agencies with lightning speed. Both men vowed to shut down USAID that provides crucial humanitarian assistance around the world.
It comes after nearly a dozen FBI officials were fired last week, with the possibility of more to come. Our senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has more.
This partnership of power under intense new scrutiny. President Trump and the world's richest man, Elon Musk, upending federal agencies to overhaul government and slash spending. The president acknowledged that Musk can get inside sensitive government computers like the Treasury Department payment system.
Well, he's got access only to letting people go that he thinks are no good if we agree with him, and it's only if we agree with him.
The White House says in his role running the Department of Government Efficiency, Musk is designated as a special government employee with top secret security clearance.
Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval, and we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't.
A top Musk target, the U.S. Agency for International Development. He argues there is too much waste in its $42 billion budget. USAID delivers food, medicine, vaccinations, and humanitarian support to 60 countries. help that is considered vital to U.S. national security. Musk spoke on his X platform, declaring the agency must be shut down.
What we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a bowl of worms.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says core life-saving programs will not be frozen during a 90-day review.
These are not donor dollars, these are taxpayer dollars. So far, a lot of the people that work at USAID have just simply refused to cooperate.
USAID is authorized and funded by Congress. Democratic lawmakers blasted the shutdown as illegal and dangerous.
Elon Musk did not create USAID. He doesn't have the power to destroy it. We're going to stop him.
USAID workers told to stay home as many relief programs are halted. Fear is also rattling the FBI. 8 top career officials fired Friday and a top official seeking names of agents who worked on January 6th cases. The FBI Agents Association in a statement described agents as extremely fearful of being removed, and some started to pack up their desks. This tension at the Bureau comes as the Senate is still working through the confirmation process for Kash Patel to be the next FBI director. He said under oath at his hearing that all FBI employees would be protected from political retribution. And Senate Democrats on that key committee are saying they want more answers about what's happening inside the FBI.
All right, Kelly, thank you.
We're joined now by Dr. Atul Gawande. He's the former assistant administrator for global health at USAID. Dr. Gawande, good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. Yesterday on X, you called the potential USAID shutdown unconstitutional. I know you've also spoken with workers who are still currently at the agency. What have they told you about what's happening there?
It's now been several days, almost a week of total freezing of all activities. And what they're decrying, what Musk has called worms, has said that is a criminal enterprise, are programs that work through, nasty organizations like Catholic Relief Services, Save the Children, the World Food Program. These programs were reaching, just a week ago, hundreds of millions of people around the world. And now there are 20 million people who are able to get HIV medicines who can't. These are medicines keeping them alive, and they are not getting them. They are people who've been terminated. It's a purging of the organization, including top experts in malaria, childhood immunization, and so on. There are thousands of people who are being laid off, even in the United States, in the last few days and going into the coming week.
Shutting down the organization, you mentioned some of the global impacts. Do you worry it could have an impact here at home as well?
100%. These are, they're on several levels. Number one, just 2 weeks ago, until I transitioned out of the Biden administration, we were leading work addressing disease outbreaks all over the world. This includes bird flu, which has already killed an American on home soil. The program monitoring in 49 countries where bird flu is coming in and what's happening has been shut down. Those folks are not working. And there are 3 serious other outbreaks happening. That's just one example. Eradication of polio, ending HIV, ending TB. These benefit Americans and humanity.
USAID spends money, as you just mentioned, in foreign countries on things like critical medical supplies and treatment. But there's also been a lot of talk about other things that money is spent on. For example, one thing that NBC News pulled out was media platforms in countries like Moldova to counter Russian disinformation. Can you understand why some taxpayers might be confused by that use of money or not think it's a good use of money? How do you explain some of these things and why it's necessary?
USAID is the cornerstone of our national security, and it works through civilian relationships that advance not only what I've described, disaster relief and health, but also bring us influence in places where we otherwise don't have it to counter Russian and Chinese propaganda and efforts. That includes addressing misinformation, bolstering civil society organizations in Africa, Asia, and in Eastern Europe. This is a vital part of our national security, all shut down. It's like taking the Department of Defense and saying, I'm going to put it on pause. I'm a surgeon. You can't put an operation on pause halfway through and say, I'll be back in 90 days. People are already being harmed. People are already dying as a consequence.
All right, Dr. Atul Gawande, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, at the heart of the tariff drama we've been discussing all morning is the southern U.S. border. And that is where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just met with U.S. troops who were recently sent to New Mexico. The visit comes as we learn some undocumented migrants arrested by the Trump administration are already being released back into the U.S. to the apparent surprise of the border czar. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson is there.
Leaving Washington for the first time since his confirmation, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth headed to the U.S. southern border in New Mexico to shake hands with some of the 1,500 troops deployed by President Trump, who joined the 2,500 already in place under former President Biden. These troops aren't able to do enforcement, so what exactly are their day-to-day tasks?
What they do is relieve Border Patrol and to have the opportunity to actually do the interdiction. So they're calling in observation to Border Patrol, who then interdict. It's a process that in the past, Tom was telling me, might take 30 minutes.
The show of force, part of a larger immigration crackdown, including military mass deportation flights and ICE raids. Yet exclusive NBC News reporting shows that ICE has already released some migrants back into the United States, opting to use ankle monitors due to full beds and federal court orders that prohibit indefinite detention. We asked Border Czar Tom Homan about the releases.
I'm not aware of that, but now you said that, I'll find out what happened.
Over the weekend, the Department of Defense released this video they say shows Marines taking off for Guantanamo Bay, preparing to house migrants at a military site there.
We are building out our capacity at Guantanamo Bay. Right now, that is where the worst are going.
And across the country, from Chicago to Los Angeles, hundreds took to the streets to protest escalating immigration enforcement, as some businesses closed their doors, hoping to show what a country without immigrant labor might look like.
Without immigrants, we wouldn't have food to serve. So I think that's mainly like our point in doing that and showing people that like this is how it would affect you and how it really does affect us all.
Our thanks to Priscilla Thompson for that report. In another development, the state of Texas has granted its National Guard soldiers the power to make immigration arrests, a power not granted to troops sent to the border by the federal government.
Well, as President Trump's second term gets up to full speed, every day seems to bring a new flood of executive action as the administration tries to quickly remake the federal government. At the center of it all is the president's chief of staff, a guiding force who has largely avoided the spotlight while making history. Susie Wiles, the Trump campaign co-chair and veteran of Florida politics, is the first woman to hold the position of White House chief of staff. NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has her story.
The Ice Maiden. We call her the Ice Maiden.
That's President Trump's nickname of choice for his incoming chief of staff, Susie Wiles, whose successful captaining of his 2024 campaign earned her a reputation of leading with a calm demeanor, but also a resolute poise, respected among Trump's closest allies. Wiles set to become the first woman ever to hold the powerful post. But under this president, she'll face another challenge, keeping her job for a full term, something her predecessors from Trump admin 1.0 failed to do. Wiles' ascension comes after a long career steering powerful men to elected office, at the sides of mayors in Jacksonville, Florida, and running the gubernatorial campaigns for Rick Scott and later Ron DeSantis. Back in 2015, Donald Trump was still just a long-shot candidate for president, so he turned to Wiles for help in winning Florida, which he did. Once Trump was in the White House, a revolving door of chiefs of staff. The first, Reince Priebus, holding the role for one of the shortest stints in American history. The second, John Kelly, a former Marine Corps general. Kelly clashing behind closed doors with the president, resigning after just over a year in the role, later lashing out at his former boss, comparing him to a dictator. OMB Director Mick Mulvaney was next, but just in an acting capacity, until Mr. Trump settled on Congressman Mark Meadows to close out his first term. Meadows would go on to be indicted along with Mr. Trump down in Fulton County, Georgia, as part of alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Meadows pled not guilty while the prosecution remains in limbo. In November 2022, Trump turned to his fellow Floridian to take the helm of his comeback campaign, leading the latest White House bid as co-campaign manager. Wiles navigated the Trump team through assassination attempts, a change at the top of the Democratic ticket, in multiple criminal cases, also avoiding the kind of staff turnover that plagued not just the first administration, but the first 2 campaigns. Trump trying to give her the undesired spotlight on election night.
Susie, come, Susie, come. Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you.
And just days later, announcing she had the job, crediting her with helping achieve one of the greatest political victories in American history. But the question remains, can the woman nicknamed the Ice Maiden keep 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue operating smoothly? Or will her chief of staff tenure face similar fates as the men before her? Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News, Washington.
Staying in Washington, today's salvage crews plan to lift more of that American Airlines jet out of the Potomac River. It is a meticulous piece-by-piece process following last week's deadly midair crash. Investigators are also starting to get a clearer picture of what happened in the moments before impact. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has more.
As we advised, conducting first lift.
It was just before 10 a.m. when recovery teams managed to lift one of the American Eagle's engines out of the Potomac River.
We transferred debris from the water to FBI here on the eastern shore.
A flotilla of boats, cranes, and divers working to raise pieces of the fuselage, the windows still visible, and recover the remains of the last 12 of the 67 people who died in that midair crash with an Army helicopter. New NTSB drone video shows the wreckage of both the plane and the Black Hawk resting in the Potomac. NTSB investigators are hoping the helicopter's black box will reveal its altitude before the crash. Air traffic control radar indicated it was at 200 feet, the maximum allowed for choppers. But the plane's black box shows the crash happened at roughly 325 feet.
There are all kinds of reasons that you could deviate from an altitude. You know, something as simple as a flock of birds is in front of you, or you may deviate if you see something that's an obstacle or other threat to your flight.
Like many control towers, Reagan National has struggled with understaffing and overtime. On Wednesday night, 5 controllers were on duty, just one handling both plane and helicopter traffic.
They are stressed out, they're tapped out, they're overworked. That's no excuse.
For years, Reagan's congested airspace has been a top safety concern, with planes and choppers flying just a few hundred feet apart. For now, the airspace is closed to all but police and medevac helicopters. Captain Jason Ambrosi is the president of the Airline Pilots Union.
Is it time to separate out helicopter traffic from regular passenger traffic here at Reagan Airport?
Yeah, look, it's an ongoing investigation, but clearly we can see that helicopter traffic and airline traffic doesn't mix.
On board the regional jet, 28 members of the U.S. figure skating community, most of them teenagers, parents, and coaches.
Our thanks to Tom Costello for that report. Investigators are working to synchronize flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder data from both of the aircraft, as well as air traffic control communications, to build a detailed timeline of the crash.
Let's turn now to weather. Around 13 million people in Central California find themselves under flood watches this morning.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman has more on the dangerous conditions coming to the West Coast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We've had a kind of busy weekend for folks across the West Coast, specifically California, with multiple kind of rainy days for them. And so no surprise, with more rain on the way, we've got these flood alerts up. Today, they are centered mainly across Central California. So we've got San Francisco and Sacramento included in that. 13 million people across this region are going to keep those in effect through the day today. And you can see why. More of that moisture kind of making a beeline for the coast as the day goes on. It does fall in the form of snow for some folks and, of course, heavy rain for others. So the flood risk will remain with us through the day today. Notice, though, by tomorrow, that shifts off towards parts of the Rockies and we get a bit of a break for California. That doesn't last, though, because, of course, we've got this atmospheric river set up. And basically, that's a highway for these storms to kind of make a beeline into the coast. And that's exactly what we see happen once again by the time we get into Thursday. So, again, a renewed flood threat as we round out our next couple of days and this work week. As we get close to the end of it, at least, we'll see multiple kind of days where we deal with flooding across this region. One thing to note for today, the flash flooding is focused from Fort Bragg out towards Sacramento, including San Francisco, and down just north of San Luis Obispo. So this is going to be something that we likely will see develop through the day today. In some spots, we could see upwards of 5 to even 10 inches of rain, especially for those coastal ranges. ranges. We'll also see some really much needed rainfall across parts of Southern California. That does include Los Angeles, Santa Barbara area, with about 1 to 3 inches for folks there. Snowfall totals will be upwards of a foot to 2 feet in some of these locations, specifically the Sierra Range. We'll pick up some additional snow. Now, meanwhile, we've got really chilly air kind of settling into parts of the northern plains. So we've got some of these cold weather alerts up, and for good reason. These temperatures, at least it feels like, are well below zero right now. Notice Minneapolis, 17 degrees below zero is what it feels like, with an actual temperature sitting at just zero. Big difference for what they're dealing with for the southern half of the country, though. Notice these temperatures today. We'll see some potential records across basically places like Houston. We'll head to 80 degrees. The record for this date, 81. We'll be into the upper 70s across the southeast. Phoenix heads to 85 degrees, guys. We'll keep that cooler kind of trend going for our friends in the northern part of the country. But the southern half, I mean, boy, feels like spring and then some.
This is when the Minnesotans are glad they planned their Florida vacation for this week now.
Correct.
At this moment.
We have a lot of practice.
The stars align. Thanks,
Angie. You got it.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, State Farm under fire. Controversy over plans by California's largest home insurer to increase rates by more than 20%. Just weeks after those deadly wildfires. More on the fallout, plus the company's response.
Up first after the break, a high-stakes face-to-face at the White House today. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with President Trump as Israel works to bring the last of the hostages back home. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. President Trump is scheduled to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House later this afternoon.
The two leaders are expected to focus on the fragile ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas and efforts to bring all of the hostages home.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News national correspondent Yasmin Masougian, who's in Tel Aviv. Yasmin, good morning. So Prime Minister Netanyahu is the first world leader to meet with Mr. Trump since the president took office 15 days ago. Talk about how important this meeting is to the stability of the ceasefire in place right now, and just where you are. How do people in Tel Aviv feel about this?
You cannot underestimate, guys, how important this meeting is. Obviously, we know Mideast envoy to President Trump, Steve Witkoff, along with President Trump himself, were integral to even negotiating this ceasefire in the first place. A lot of individuals, both Israelis and Palestinians, putting a lot of stock into this meeting, to say the least, to help negotiate, obviously, phase 2 of this ceasefire deal, which negotiations are set to begin later this week or this weekend as well. I've been out in the streets speaking to a lot of Israelis, and of course, our brave team on the ground in Gaza as well has been speaking to Palestinians there. And there are some similarities amongst their opinions of both Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, along with their how they feel about President Trump and whether or not he can actually help keep this ceasefire deal going. Let's take a listen to what they have to say, and then we'll talk on the other side.
I'm very optimistic because of Trump, not because of Bibi. Because I know Trump's most desired, action here in the Middle East is to bring the hostages back. I know he's serious. I know that we have results from having Trump as president of the U.S., but I don't count on Bibi to come up with the solutions by himself.
Maybe Trump will press on Netanyahu and force Netanyahu to stop the war, also in order to support their goals and aims in Palestinian issues.
So certainly not a lot of confidence in Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. I tell you, I talked to a lot of individuals, and there was only one individual who had confidence in Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu's leadership. However, the similarity was startling to me in that both Gazans and Israelis as well, both of them having a certain amount of confidence in President Trump and helping to kind of, quote unquote, control Bibi Netanyahu heading into this phase 2 of this ceasefire deal, guys.
And Yasmin, according to the ceasefire agreement, negotiations on implementing the second phase of the deal should start on Monday. Do we know where they stand? Are those going to happen?
Yeah, they are going to happen. And we got word from Qatar that the conversations have begun for planning as to when actually the conversations will restart and where they will happen, right? We know, obviously, Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu is in Washington today, set to meet with President Trump later this evening, I believe around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. He has said, his office communicating along with local media as well, that they will resume phase 2 of these negotiations after having this meeting with President Trump. So that means when Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu returns here to Israel, likely on Saturday, that is when these negotiations will begin. 2 things to keep in mind, though. Egyptian president will likely be heading to Washington this Thursday. Also, an invitation is out for the Jordanian king, for February 11th. So 2, I think, incredibly important things as we're talking about kind of the next phase of these negotiations, guys.
And Yasmin, in the 2 weeks since the ceasefire began, aid has been surging into Gaza. But real quick, do we know if supplies are getting into the hands of those who need it most?
Yes, food aid is actually getting into the hands of the Palestinians. One of the things, though, that are falling short is tent and caravan. So if you look at some of the images coming out of Gaza that we have seen repeatedly, guys, I mean, it is completely flattened, right? Total rubble. You're talking about comparisons to a wildfire plus a Cat 5 hurricane plus a tornado as well, and then war on top of it, right? So there is really nowhere to live for folks, for Palestinians that are returning to the north of Gaza. They need those tents and those caravans. So far, they have not yet gotten the tents and caravans that have been promised to them. However, they are getting the food, the water, and the medical aid that is coming through 600 trucks per day since the ceasefire deal was put into place, guys.
All right. Yasmin, appreciate your reporting. Thank you.
Coming up, a medical breakthrough that could help millions of people. When we return, the new technology offering some paralyzed patients a restored sense of feeling.
And researchers throwing cold water on the growing trend of cold water therapy. What you should know about the pros and cons before you take that plunge. The weekly check-in is next here on Morning News Now. We're back with a look at a breakthrough treatment that could offer hope for paralysis patients. The procedure uses microchips and artificial intelligence. And those who've undergone it report not only improved mobility, but also a restored sense of feeling. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has one man's story.
For years, Keith Thomas lived out his dream in Manhattan, managing hundreds of people for a Wall Street firm, and few worries weighing him down.
What did you like to do?
Play tennis, go jogging on the East River.
But a Long Island pool accident in 2020 changed his whole life, paralyzing the 45-year-old from the mid-chest down and robbing him of sensation and movement in all of his limbs, at least. Until a medical breakthrough at Northwell Health's Feinstein Institute for Medical Research, where lead bioengineer Chad Boughton and his team developed a technology they call a double neural bypass. Chips are implanted in a patient's brain, and the signals for sensation and movement sent back and interpreted through artificial intelligence, and then redirected to the body and spine, creating a loop that could prove life-changing.
Taking someone who had lost the ability to move their limbs, to sense or touch things and actually feel the sensation of that, to restore those abilities to the patient.
Yes, that's exactly right. We have finally discovered that the signals in the brain are still there and strong even after a traumatic injury.
Other neurotechnology companies, like Elon Musk's Neuralink, have implanted chips in patients to assist functionality, but recovery and restoring damaged neurons appears to be new ground.
Is it wild to you to think that you have become the first person to sort of blaze this path and show that it's possible?
Yeah.
We watched as Keith managed movements that only months ago would have been impossible.
That's actually sensory data.
From picking up a cup.
What are you feeling, Keith?
Like a jolt of energy.
To navigating a quick bite of Twizzlers.
Got it.
Wow. Last year, surgeons managed to place those chips in Keith's brain in areas that they spent months mapping out.
Pull.
Leading to incremental improvements. And then a watershed moment.
I'm ready.
When Keith actually felt his sister's palm for the first time since the accident.
That was an incredible moment, and there wasn't a dry eye in the lab.
And with 5 million people living in the U.S. with paralysis and 100 million worldwide, the significance is hard to overstate.
It really hit me. In that moment, I felt like he's experiencing something he hadn't experienced in a long time, and that there's hope. There's hope for the future.
In the midst of a lot of misfortune, do you feel pretty fortunate?
Yeah, I do feel pretty fortunate.
A story whose next chapter is only beginning to be told. Sam Brock, NBC News, Long Island.
Time now for our weekly mental health check-in. This week, we're going to take a look at the rise in sports betting and its effects on mental health as we gear up for the Super Bowl this weekend.
Plus, if you're considering a cold plunge to boost your well-being, you might want to think again. We're going to explain why.
That is all over social media. Joining us now with more on this is psychotherapist Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Dr. Ludwig, always great to see you. Let's start with the Super Bowl. So just days away, of course, from the big game, but it's coming at a time when the popularity of legal sports gambling is at an all-time high. And according to a legal sports report, Americans wagered nearly $150 billion on sports betting in 2024. Why are more and more people drawn to it, and how can people be careful this Sunday? What are those mental health impacts we should keep in mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, young boys specifically are being targeted. And it's through commercials, and it's been normalized, and legalized betting also makes it more accessible for young kids. It's on their phone, so they have easy access, and it's become kind of a bro culture kind of thing. The downside is it's a very dangerous addiction, and if it moves in that direction. They've also seen an increase in bankruptcy, and having a gambling addiction also can increase the likelihood of suicide attempts. So I would advise that people be very careful. It'd be great if these companies could have warning labels on it. I think we need to do some things, both business-wise and in our culture, to educate people as to the dangers of gambling if it goes too far.
Yeah, it's an issue we're just not paying enough attention to right now, and it's growing so quickly. All right, let's talk about dating apps. We're 10 days away from Valentine's Day. So a new study published in the journal Science Direct found that while that may help people find love, these apps can be linked to poor body image, mental health, well-being, kind of like social media, I guess, right? Walk us through the study's findings.
So there was a study looking at self-esteem and body image connected to these apps. And what they found was because these dating apps are so image-centric, that it did increase worries about one's looks, body, and this also had an impact on mental health and self-esteem. So again, we don't know if the apps are causing these feelings, exacerbating it, or if there's some type of correlation. But I think most people know with dating, it can feel so judgmental. And one of our needs as human beings is to feel really loved for who we are. And we can't always get that through apps. So, you know, use, enjoy, but remember, apps are one way of meeting people, not the only way.
Great tip there. All right, before you go, we have seen growing popularity around people taking cold plunges or ice baths as a way to relieve stress, boost immunity, and, you know, there's all these purported benefits. But a new study found that the practice actually might not live up to the hype. Why is that?
Well, they found with this cold water immersion, in some cases, it can increase inflammation, which is not ideal. They also looked at some of the benefits were temporary and not necessarily long lasting. So there really needs to be more extensive research, better studies, more diversified studies in order to really have a better sense of whether cold water immersion works, and if so, who does it work best on and for.
All right, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, that's actually good to hear because that is painful, and I did it once and I hated it. So now I feel less like I need to be doing it all the time.
Zero desire.
I'm waiting for the study.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming up, State Farm facing the fallout over its plan to hike home insurance rates in the wake of the Southern California wildfires. We're going to have the latest on that controversy.
Plus, it takes big bucks to buy a commercial for the big game, but are those Super Bowl ads worth the cost? How the price tag compares to the payoff. That's next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. We are less than a week away from Super Bowl 59, kicking off in New Orleans this Sunday. Well, over 100 million people are expected to tune in to see the Kansas City Chiefs face off against the Philadelphia Eagles. And all those eyes mean a big opportunity for advertisers who have been shelling out big bucks, as they do every year, for a chance to show off their brands during the big game. Our Jesse Kirsch takes a look.
The Super Bowl, America's biggest sporting event, and so much more. Some of us watch for the football, others wait for halftime. And in between the two, so many tuning in for the commercials. Classic ads can live on in American culture for decades. But if you want a shot at that kind of glory this year, it's going to cost some serious dough. A source telling CNBC broadcaster Fox sold some ads for a record $8 million each, which did not scare advertisers away.
If you're still bent on blowing this fat stack of cash, there's a couple ways you could do it.
So why are companies shelling out big time if traditional TV is hemorrhaging viewers to streaming in our phones?
So the Super Bowl is really unique in that people want to watch the advertising. They're looking forward to it. The other thing in terms of viewership, the Super Bowl keeps trending up.
More than 123 million people watched last year's Super Bowl. Nielsen says that helped set the record for the largest audience for a single network telecast in history.
When you realize the U.S. only has 330 million people, you're going to reach about 1 out of every 3 people in the country. There's no other way to do this.
One market research company says the average Super Bowl ad is 20 times more effective than a regular TV ad at driving brand perceptions. And featuring a celebrity, while costing even more, can also pay off.
We're doing a Dunkin' Donuts commercial, right?
Expected this year, Ben and Casey Affleck teaming up with Jeremy Strong for the latest talker from Dunkin' Donuts. The cast of NBC Universal's Fast and Furious reuniting for a Haagen-Dazs ad.
I can't believe they let us back in this place.
And Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan adding to the excitement, recreating the iconic scene from When Harry Met Sally. Sydney Sweeney even making a cameo.
I'll have what she's having.
This time, they're having Hellmann's mayonnaise. Other brands introducing new faces. Duracell says it's running its first ever national Super Bowl ad, introducing an ambassador to take on a perennial icon, the Energizer Bunny.
They keep going and going.
When everybody has seen the same ad, all of a sudden that's something people can talk about and they can interact with it. And best case, it can turn your ad into a discussion topic, and it can even emerge as part of the whole culture and society.
A good Super Bowl ad able to live on well after the final whistle.
Hey, kid.
Thanks, Mean Joe.
All right, thanks to Jesse Kirsch for that report. To put that into perspective, how much the cost of Super Bowl ads have gone up, the price of a 30-second spot in Super Bowl I back in 1967 was about $37,500. That's...
I feel like they're not going to, like, do a little flashback sale or anything like that.
Yeah, no.
Let's get some money news now, more money news. As California wildfire victims struggle to recover, the state's largest home insurance company, State Farm, wants to raise their rates.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, Joe, good morning to you. So State Farm is asking California to approve an emergency rate hike. This is in the wake of the wildfires that swept through the Los Angeles area. Now, the insurer is asking for an average increase of 22% for homeowners. As of Saturday, State Farm says it's received more than 8,700 claims and paid out more than $1 billion to customers. It says the fires will be the costliest disaster in company history. Salesforce is reportedly cutting 1,000 jobs, even as the company is also hiring salespeople to sell new AI products. Now, Bloomberg says it is unclear which divisions will be affected, but those workers will be able to apply for other jobs. Salesforce has declined comment. Other tech companies, including Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta, have also announced job cuts this year. And Nintendo is cutting sales forecast for its Switch game console by 12% as it's losing momentum ahead of the launch of the next generation device later this year. Now, last month, the company said it will release the Switch 2 at an event on April 2nd. Nintendo is dependent on its console business, even as its open stores and its video game characters like Mario Brothers have been featured in hit movies and at theme parks, guys.
All right, Silvana, thank you very much.
Let's head back to New Orleans, where newly obtained emails are making headlines ahead of the Super Bowl. Members of the Saints front office appear to have worked closely with the Catholic Church to do damage control as the church was investigated for allegations of sexual abuse. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra has the details.
As anticipation grows for this week's Super Bowl in New Orleans,
host city's team, the Saints, coming under new scrutiny for its alleged role in providing damage control for the Catholic Church during a 2018 sex abuse crisis. Email exchanges obtained by the Associated Press, the New York Times, and the Guardian revealing the possible scope of the team leadership's influence.
One of the reasons the story has taken so long is the degree with which the church has opposed full transparency.
Jim Muschin is an investigative reporter for the AP, which has been investigating the New Orleans Archdiocese for years, including in 2018 when the church released a credible accused clergy abuser list.
We did some investigative reporting 5 years ago that revealed that the list itself was undercounted.
According to the Associated Press, the emails show that a Saint spokesperson was able to see that list of accused clergy members before it was made public, and that a call with the city's top prosecutor, quote, allowed us to take certain people off the list. The Archdiocese of New Orleans telling NBC News in part, quote, no one from the Saints organization had any role in compiling the list or had any say in adding or removing anyone from the list.
This was not the Catholicism I was raised in.
State Representative Mandy Landry represents Louisiana's District 91.
I'm hearing from people all over the city, black, white, old, young, who just can't believe it. And, you know, the Saints are beloved here. So this is really rocking all parts of the city, all people up and down.
The emails also indicating the team's president, Dennis Lauscha, provided prep questions for the Archbishop to be ready to answer in front of the reporters. According to the AP, the team's owner, Gail Benson, who's Catholic, has long enjoyed a close relationship with Archbishop Gregory Amond. NBC News has not seen the emails, and the Saints have not independently responded to NBC News' request for comment. But the team telling the Associated Press in part, quote, no member of the Saints organization condones or wants to cover up the abuse that occurred in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. That abuse occurred is a terrible fact.
My son was sexually abused by a priest who is currently incarcerated here in Louisiana.
For Letitia Payton, today's reporting marked a major step forward in shedding light on abuse, but casts a shadow on a weekend that should have been about celebration.
This added tragedy of the place where we thought we might be able to find a little bit of a refuge. Maybe in the Super Bowl, we realized the Saints were connected with all this trauma that happened to children.
Our thanks to Marissa Parra for that report. The Associated Press says that since the Saints began assisting the church, at least 7 current and former members of the local clergy have been charged with crimes against children. Coming up, celebrating service with music.
I love to listen to music. It's nice to hear your own stuff played, too.
When we come back, the special honor for a World War II vet and talented musician. This is Morning News Now. Finally this hour, a decorated World War II veteran with an impressive record in the military got the celebration of a lifetime, honoring both his service and his music. Reporter Sam Reed from our affiliate in Rhode Island has the story.
Having lived in Little Compton for the last 70-plus years, John William Middendorf II has made a big impact on this country.
My goal in life was to do well. We do well when we help others do well.
At the age of 100.5 years old.
Going on 200.
Bill, as his friends call him, says he's a chartered member of the Over the Hill gang.
My eyesight's gone. I'm blind as a bat. And my hearing is half gone.
And while he may be a member of that, his laundry list of achievements might leave one speechless.
I'm just another human being, feeling very proud, too.
Middendorf served as the Secretary of the Navy and Ambassador to the Netherlands, U.S. Representative to the Organization of American States, and U.S. Representative to the European Community. A Navy destroyer is being built that'll bear his name, and he's a prolific author who studied music in school, making it his mission to compose marches.
I've written over maybe 50 marches.
The most incredible thing to me is that he found the time to write this music.
Mark Stickney is the founder of Historic Music of Newport. He's also a conductor.
A few years back, the War College Archives introduced me to his music with the Naval War College March.
Having heard the meaningful melodies Middendorf created, he wanted to share them with anyone who would listen. A concert came to mind. So hundreds of people packed the Park Theater in Cranston.
About 60 musicians that came from all over New England, some of the best musicians in the region. because they want to play this music and they want to be a part of this story.
The concert consisting of Middendorf's music.
And it's inspirational.
He was front and center.
I mean, I love to listen to music. It's nice to hear your own stuff played too.
Though his hearing is on the decline as he sits here in silence, thanks to his talents and time, others will continue to take notes.
Why go the extra mile for him and his music?
Because it's worth it. That's easy. It's music that I fell in love with, and it's worth sharing. People need to hear more of it.
What a gift. Our thanks to Sam Reed for that heartwarming story. 100 going on 200. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, a new chapter unfolding in America's tariff tussle. A looming trade war with Canada and Mexico staved off for now. But China is fighting fire with fire, launching its own retaliatory tariffs on coal and natural gas from the U.S. So what does it all mean for your money? We're breaking it down. Elsewhere in Washington, a sparring over spending that's landing billionaire Elon Musk in the hot seat. His Department of Government Efficiency setting its sights on the USAID, freezing its funding and locking out workers. It's got some top Democrats on Capitol Hill sounding the alarm.
DOGE is not a real government agency. It has no authority to make spending decisions.
Plus, the Department of Education now in the Trump administration's crosshairs. We're covering it all in just a moment. Also this morning, new concerns over air safety sparked by a pair of deadly plane crashes. Salvage crews in D.C. pulling what's left of that ill-fated American Airlines flight from the frigid Potomac River, hoping for clues. Investigators in Philly begin combing through evidence from a separate disaster. We're going to bring you what we know. Folks, we're just 5 days from Super Bowl 59. It's the Eagles and the Chiefs facing off in the Big Easy. Later in the hour, we're taking you to New Orleans. We're taking you to New Orleans, where the party is already kicking off. The party's already been going for months, years. They're just adding this to it.
Yeah, especially if you're a Chiefs fan. Literally years.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll see if we get the three-peat. All right, let's begin this hour with that trade dispute between the U.S. and China, which has escalated further after Beijing announced a set of retaliatory measures against Washington.
Just minutes after the U.S.'s 10% tariff on Chinese goods came into effect overnight, China announced a 10% and 15% on certain U.S. imports. That would start on February 10th. The looming trade war comes after the White House delayed the implementation of tariffs on its North American neighbors, Mexico and Canada. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans has the latest.
Hey there. It was a chaotic 24 hours with trade threats and U-turns, and all of it matters for the price you pay. This morning, the trade war heating up. China retaliating after the first of President Trump's tariffs kicked in at midnight. The U.S. imposing a 10% tax on all Chinese goods, aiming, the White House says, to stop the trade of narcotics in the U.S.
They're sending massive amounts of fentanyl.
That price hike, coming on top of pre-existing tariffs, could raise the cost of medications, with ingredients made in China including cancer drugs, antibiotics, and blood thinners, and affect a whole range of Chinese goods that Americans use, from groceries to computers and video games to popular brands like Shein and Temu. China quickly hitting back overnight, saying it's worked on controlling fentanyl, and China imposing its own tariffs on U.S. coal and natural gas, vehicles, and farm equipment. Beijing also targeting major American companies, opening an investigation into Google, restricting the company that owns fashion brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, and adding controls on materials that the tech industry depends on. Trump saying he'll continue the negotiation.
That was just an opening salvo.
While yesterday pulling back from the brink of tariffs with Canada and Mexico. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together, and moving ahead with a plan to beef up security on the northern border. Tariffs against Mexico also on hold after Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to deploy 10,000 troops to the U.S. border to address drug trafficking and migration.
We're going to have a big negotiation with Mexico.
Now pressure is with both countries in the next month. Some members of Congress, which technically has tariff power but usually hands it over to the president, raising concerns about the trade war with two U.S. allies.
It'll hurt American consumers long term.
So bottom line, how much could these tariffs cost the average household? If they last for several months, one estimate is more than $800 this year. Some of the first increases we could see, prescription drugs and antibiotics from China. Back to you.
All right, Christine, thank you.
And we heard it there briefly from Christine, but let's talk more about how President Trump's tariffs on China could impact drug prices with NBC News health and medical reporter Berkeley Lovelace Jr. Good to have you with us. You wrote a piece on this for NBCNews.com. First, help us understand just how big of a role China plays in manufacturing the ingredients that go into the drugs.
Yeah, so it plays a big role. So over the last several decades, generic drug manufacturing has moved overseas as it's become less profitable in the U.S. So about half of all of our generic drugs come from abroad. About 80% of all of our active pharmaceutical ingredients come from places like China and India. So China is playing a bigger and bigger role. The number of manufacturing facilities in China has skyrocketed over the last few years. And so India is still the largest producer, but China is kind of right up there. And so we're increasingly reliant on other countries for our drugs.
And now that these tariffs on China have come into effect, what kind of impact do we see this having on drug prices?
Yeah, so it'll take a few months, but experts expect prices will increase. There are contracts in place that keep prices fixed, but as those contracts kind of turn over and expire over the next few months, we'll start to see price increases. And so for hospitals and pharmacies, this could be a big deal because they may start stockpiling up on drugs to try to avoid this higher cost. And that's a bad thing for places like rural hospitals who don't typically have the manpower to make calls and make sure they stockpile up on those drugs. So we could start seeing some disparities as well. But it will take a few months before we start seeing these price increases. Although I will say experts expect there will be shortages almost immediately from this as well because of the price increase.
That drives up high prices as well, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the contracts. Are there any other provisions in place that could prevent some of these higher prices?
Yeah, so there are some protections in place. There is the Inflation Reduction Act rule that limits the price increases or drug prices that limit the cost faster than the price of inflation. And there's also state anti-price gouging laws that limit price increases. And so there are some protections that could limit those increases, but it remains to be seen whether or not companies will be able to get around these loopholes or not to be able to, at least stay in
the
business.
prices at least, yeah.
Stay in business.
Berkeley, thank you so much. Important issue. It impacts a lot of people.
Thank you. Thanks. Also in Washington this morning, President Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency, which is led by Elon Musk, is getting fresh backlash. It comes as Musk attempts to slash budgets and shut down multiple federal agencies. The Trump administration is also facing a lawsuit over the new department's access to sensitive Treasury information. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake is live at the White House with the latest on all this. Garrett, good morning.
Yes, Savannah, a lot going on here with Musk and his team facing that new lawsuit from a coalition of federal workers union over their access to Treasury Department systems. But it has been Musk's targeting of the U.S. Agency for International Development that's drawn the most attention. The agency's funding has been frozen, its workers locked out of their D.C. headquarters, and now Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he's their acting director.
The battle over who controls government spending now centered on the U.S. Agency for International Development. President Trump's ally Elon Musk placing the agency and its more than $40 billion budget in the crosshairs of the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
It's beyond repair. We're shutting it down.
USAID, a humanitarian organization created by Congress in 1961 as a tool of American diplomacy, spends much of its money on vaccinations, medicine, and food. The Trump administration saying some of the money goes to DEI programs abroad.
As an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap.
On Monday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio declaring USAID now reports to him.
We have rank insubordination. So we had no choice but to take dramatic steps to bring this thing under control.
With agency workers and lawmakers locked out of their headquarters and many relief programs frozen and under review.
The immediate impact in the field is that people will die.
Democrats blasting Musk's moves at USAID and his DOGE team being granted access to the Treasury Department's payment systems, confirmed by the president Monday.
DOGE is not a real government agency. It has no authority to make spending decisions.
All as NBC News learned yesterday that Musk is officially part of the federal government, serving as a, quote, special government employee in the administration with top secret security clearance. President Trump defending Musk's actions.
Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval.
The president also targeting the Department of Education for possible closure, according to reports overnight in the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, citing sources familiar with the discussions. The move a frequent campaign promise from Mr. Trump.
I'm going to close the Department of Education and move education back to the states.
But closing a cabinet department would require an act of Congress, all but impossible with narrow Republican majorities in both chambers.
Garrett, so much news going on. Of course, we've got some on the immigration front. There's a new overseas offer to jail convicted criminals from the U.S. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, Savannah, this was an incredibly unusual offer made by the president of El Salvador to Secretary Rubio, who was visiting that country yesterday. Now, the Salvadoran president has offered not just to accept back migrants from the U.S. from El Salvador, but migrants from any other country, or even to house American citizens convicted of crimes in Salvadoran jails in exchange for a fee paid by the U.S. Now, it is entirely unclear how interested or how seriously the Trump administration is taking this offer, but any plan to ship American citizens abroad would certainly end up with significant legal challenges. Savannah?
All right, Garrett, thank you.
Questions are swirling about aviation safety following deadly plane crashes in D.C. and Philadelphia. Today, crews plan to lift additional parts of that American Airlines passenger jet out of the Potomac River, piece by piece, after last week's deadly collision with an Army helicopter. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello joins us with the latest from Reagan National Airport. Tom, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. D.C.'s fire chief says they continue to recover remains in the water right at the end of that runway behind me. Their challenge today is going to be the winds that may make the efforts on the water a bit more complicated. But the high priority continues to be recovering all of the remains from the victims who are still in the water nearly a week later, and also recovering pieces of the plane, including the cockpit. Against the backdrop of Reagan National Airport this morning, salvage crews are back to work battling gusty winds and pulling the wreckage of American Airlines 5342 from the Potomac River.
We transferred debris from the water to FBI here on the eastern shore.
Emerging from the water on Monday, the plane's right engine, fuselage, and right wing. Divers also recovered additional remains of victims who died in last week's midair collision with that Army helicopter.
It's tragic in everything imaginable that you can think of.
Newly released NTSB drone video shows boats surrounding a significant chunk of the jetliner, the chopper's wreckage resting in the water nearby. The investigation now focused on how the collision happened at roughly 325 feet, according to the plane's black box, well above the 200 feet maximum allowed for helicopters.
It's important for us to not speculate, because there are all kinds of reasons that you could deviate from an altitude.
For now, the airspace near the airport remains closed to all helicopters except police and medevac choppers. Captain Jason Ambrosi is the president of the Airline Pilots Union.
Everything adds risk to aviation. Taking a layer of risk out of it, taking the helicopters away, is a step in the right direction because it mitigates that risk.
Earlier in the day, the nation's new Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, visited the site of another deadly plane crash in northern Philadelphia, where a medical transport jet plunged to the ground shortly after takeoff, killing all 6 people on board the Learjet 55 and 1 in a car on the ground. Investigators say at least 24 were injured, including 2 in critical condition.
If you look at the impact and how deep that crater is, it was a very steep angle at which that aircraft came down.
Yeah, the black box from that Learjet, the cockpit voice recorder, is now at the NTSB lab in Washington for a full readout. They're hoping to get clues as to why that plane suddenly really just torpedoed right into the ground. Joe?
And Tom, when we talk about the Washington, D.C. investigation, we know the NTSB investigation is just getting started, but where do things stand?
Yeah. So today we're hoping to get a readout on the black box from the chopper. Now, specifically, we want to hear the altitude from the cockpit flight data recorder, because that will tell us the most precise reading possible at exactly what the altitude was for the chopper. As we said, there's some discrepancy. This will be the defining number we expect. Separately, I can tell you that the air traffic controllers who were in the tower have all now been interviewed, and we are also expecting some form of official commentary later today. Joe.
All right, Tom, thank you.
Now it's time for a check on your morning news now weather. Let's start with new details on that atmospheric river hitting the west.
Angie Lastman is here with that. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We've got multiple days of some heavy rain still expected for our friends out in California. So let's start there. We've got 13 million people currently under these flood alerts. Notice the river flood warnings that are in effect for Northern California, and then a whole good chunk of the state under this flood watch. It's going to last at least through the day today. And you can see the rain already coming down specifically from the Bay Area to Sacramento. This is the kind of general region that we're going to see the most impactful weather through the day today when it comes to the heavy rain and that snow. It's all going to be the potential for folks across this region. Now, through the day today, the flood risk will be centered for the Bay Area and the Sacramento Valley. By tomorrow, this system starts to shift to the east, and we do get a bit of a break, a little bit of this additional snowfall, maybe a little bit of rain for points into Northern California and north of that, but really a much needed break for your day tomorrow before we get this next wave of rain, snow, and wind that arrives thanks to that highway of that atmospheric river kind of delivering all this moisture to the coast. We'll see some additional rainfall across parts of Southern California. That is much needed. It won't be quite as much as what we're expecting across parts of Central California, though. All right, here's what we've got for today as far as the flash flood risk. Slight risk, Fort Bragg, Sacramento, San Francisco, stretching down through Monterey, all included in that as we gear up for, again, some of that saturated ground to pick up some additional rainfall. When it's all said and done, at least through the end of the work week, I think maybe 3 to 5 inches will be the more widespread amounts, but we could see some spots upwards of 8 to even 10 inches in those foothills. So we'll be watching for that, especially for the coastal ranges. Farther south, I mentioned that we'll get some rain in Southern California. Los Angeles area expected to pick up about an inch by the time we wrap up this work week. Multiple feet of snow also possible, specifically for the Sierra range, but you can see parts of the Rockies going to pick up a good amount of snow as well. And this is just kind of the setup that we're in through at least the rest of this week. Now, feeling really not normal across parts of the country. We've got these temperatures 10 to even 20 plus degrees warmer than they should be for this time of year. Denver at 66 degrees. We've got Austin headed to 81 degrees today. Mid 70s along the Gulf Coast. Notice the difference, though, for the northern tier of the country. That's where we've got that chillier air. Places like Fargo today, you're just going to get 12, or tomorrow rather, you're just going to get 12 degrees for your high temperature, while Wichita Falls ends up into the 80s. So we're kind of stuck in the same pattern here through the end of the work week with these split highs where we've got some warmth and some chilly conditions. Notice Bismarck into the weekend teens. Detroit stays into the 30s. New York City kind of flirts with those upper 30s to low to mid 40s. We end up into the 70s for Memphis by the time Saturday rolls around, and we really keep the warmth going for our friends in Texas Friday and Saturday. But check out that big jump from Saturday to Sunday. We go to the mid 80s on Saturday afternoon in Dallas, and then break out the sweaters because we are back to the upper 50s by the time Sunday rolls around. Denver, too, upper 60s for Friday. You end up into the low 40s by Sunday. So this is going to be kind of a roller coaster ride when it comes to temperatures as we get into the weekend, guys. Par for the course at this point.
In Dallas, they might break out the parkas.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, for the 50s. Exactly. Right. Thanks, Angie. There's more to come here on this hour of Morning News Now, including a founders feud between two of the most powerful people in tech, Elon Musk and OpenAI's Sam Altman. That's heading to court today. We'll dig into what it's all about.
First, after the break, it was a pandemic-era fraud scheme that prosecutors say drained hundreds of millions of dollars of federal dollars meant for low-income kids. Now its alleged mastermind faces a jury today. More on that next.
Welcome back. The alleged mastermind behind one of the largest fraud investigations in Minnesota history goes to trial today. The founder of the nonprofit Feeding Our Future is accused of overseeing a scheme to steal $250 million from a federal program that was meant to provide meals for low-income kids during the pandemic.
Well, the alleged scam involved dozens of people. Amy Bach is accused of taking more than $1 million for herself and spending at least some of that money on luxury items like travel and jewelry. She denies the allegations, saying that she received no improper payments and was unaware of any fraud taking place.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos is here to break down this case with us. Danny, great to have you. So Amy Block's set to face a jury alongside a Minneapolis restaurant owner. But tell us how they allegedly pulled this scheme off and what the charges are here.
If true, this is one of the most breathtaking, fraudulent schemes ever, and really clumsy, as most criminal schemes are, I can tell you as a criminal defense attorney. It basically worked like this. The organization got money to feed needy children during the pandemic, and then they apparently or allegedly set up these sites where they said they were feeding thousands of children a day. According to the government, this was in towns where there weren't even that many children in the town. Wow. When they submitted allegedly lists of the children being fed, the ages from week to week would go from like 7 to 12. And according to the government, they got these names from some website, randomnamegenerator.com, that apparently doesn't exist anymore. These are the government's allegations. And in return, they made millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. They allege kickbacks. They're going to allege that they used all this for luxury items. Classic government prosecution move. This is a tough case for the defense. The defense is arguing, Amy Block's attorneys, that essentially all this bad stuff was going on, maybe. I didn't know nothing about it, which, look, in white-collar criminal defense, you don't often have a lot of options. This is probably the best.
To our viewers, if this sounds familiar, it got a lot of national attention last year when Governor Tim Walz was tapped to be the running mate for Vice President Harris. It is a sprawling case. Since 2022, 70 people have been charged, 30 have pleaded guilty. At least 13 of them have been identified as potential witnesses in this week's trial. You touched on it there, but how do you see this playing out for Amy Block, especially if you got 13 people testifying?
This case was bad a month ago, but a couple weeks ago, 2 more co-defendants are pleading guilty, and presumably they're going to cooperate. That is bad news for any criminal defendant. That, together with all the other really bad evidence in this case, and if the defense's theme is basically what you call see no evil, hear no evil, which is not denying the underlying conduct, but just denying that I knew anything about it, that's going to be a tough case to make. If they've got the emails, if they've got the benefits, if she accepted benefits that seem not commensurate with what a charitable organization is supposed to get, that will not look good. And the other thing the government has going for it is just the overall storyline. You're taking money meant to feed hungry children during the pandemic, and it's so brazen. Thousands upon thousands of names on a list that allegedly are just totally made up out of whole cloth.
Danny, here's another kind of crazy detail here. This is the second trial in this case. Joe mentioned people might have heard of this. Well, last year, someone connected to a different group of defendants attempted to actually bribe one of the jury members, dropping off $120,000 in cash at their house. That juror went straight to the police. But how does that impact a current trial? There's a picture of it right there.
Yeah, I know you kids may not remember the Keystone Cops, but, I mean, this is what this is starting to sound like. And I have to tell you, I mean, people always think of criminals, especially white-collar criminals, as these masterminds. You see, everything about this case was unbelievably clumsy. And the government alleges that even when they started investigating these people, they did the classic move of pushing back, not backing off, but essentially fighting back and really taking these kinds of moves. Look, one of the worst things a criminal defendant can do is engage in what we call self-help. Let the lawyers handle everything. Don't go out there. But they do. They all think they know better than their lawyers, right, and that they can work the angles around the corners or outside of the lawyer's eye, making phone calls, maybe talking to witnesses, talking to jurors. It's a horrible idea. This is a great example of why it's a horrible idea. And look, this case is moving inexorably to trial. And most federal cases are not good prospects for the defendants. This one I give even less odds to the defendants.
Sounds like a season of Fargo.
It does.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. All right, Danny, thank you so much.
All right, a hearing in a California courtroom today will be the latest chapter in a years-long rivalry between 2 of the biggest names in technology, Elon Musk and artificial intelligence pioneer Sam Altman.
Musk has accused Altman's company OpenAI of illegally trying to monopolize the AI industry. He's asked for a court order that would stop the plans by the company behind ChatGPT to convert itself further into a for-profit business. A reminder, Musk was involved at the beginning, a co-founder. A district judge is set to hear arguments in a federal court in Oakland later today.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Brian, good morning. So, as Savannah just mentioned, Musk was one of 11 co-founders who established OpenAI as a nonprofit. That was back in 2015. First, can you just walk us through what has led him and us to this point?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a fascinating story of two great minds behind artificial intelligence that we're all familiar with, that were once friends, and now they've had this massive falling out that's taking them to court. But what Elon Musk is alleging here is that, yes, he did work with Sam Altman to stand up OpenAI when it was founded just 10 years ago in 2015, but that Sam Altman, according to the allegations lobbed here in court by Elon Musk, double-crossed him essentially by promising that OpenAI would remain a not-for-profit organization, and then double-crossing him by basically going to Microsoft and getting billions of dollars in commitments, and then eventually proposing to convert OpenAI into a for-profit structure entirely. Now, when Elon Musk first opened up this case, which was interesting because he actually then pulled the case and then reintroduced it, but when he first introduced it in the early part of last year, OpenAI responded by saying, quote, "We're sad that it's come to this with someone whom we've deeply admired, someone who inspired us to aim higher, then told us we would fail, started a competitor, and then sued us." It is worth noting here that OpenAI is a competitor to Elon Musk's own AI startup, which is called XAI. And as you mentioned, now Elon is asking for a conversion of the company's structure. He wants to suspend the license of OpenAI's software to Microsoft, and Elon also wants money for damages as well.
Brian, what can we expect to happen today? Like, where's this case head next?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, it was interesting. Elon first actually opened up this lawsuit in a federal court in California at the beginning of last year. He then pulled the case out of nowhere and then reintroduced it. So this has kind of been floating around for a while, but we are now for the first time taking this court case to opening arguments, which will begin this afternoon at 1 p.m. It's going to happen in Oakland, California. We don't know if necessarily Sam Altman and Elon Musk will be there in person, but again, it's a remarkable falling out between these two very high-profile people that are also jockeying for attention in the White House. You remember Sam Altman in the Oval Office making that $500 billion announcement? Yeah, well, Elon Musk took issue with that and actually called Sam Altman a swindler online. It's a massive falling out between these two great minds who were once at one time close friends.
Right. Yeah, it's been messy.
Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, we're going to take you to the Big Easy as we count down to Super Bowl 59.
Yeah, we're only 5 days out from the big game, so how's New Orleans preparing for all of it? Spoiler alert, the parties are already kicking off. Stay with us. That's next.
We're back now with a closer look at USAID, or the U.S. Agency for International Development. The Trump administration is looking to axe the government agency, which provides billions of dollars in humanitarian aid to other countries.
Well, with funding coming to a halt, the fate of those aid recipients is now hanging in the balance. NBC's Valerie Castro has more on what the organization actually does and who's being impacted.
The future of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, is uncertain.
USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
The agency employs more than 10,000 people, with about two-thirds serving overseas, according to a recent Congressional Research Service report. President John F. Kennedy created the organization as part of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 with the goal of administering aid to foreign countries to promote social and economic development at the height of the Cold War.
We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal.
Under the 11 presidents to follow, USAID has been instrumental in helping to alleviate poverty, disease, and other crises in strategically important countries, according to a CRS report. In 2023, the agency managed and appropriated more than $40 billion in aid, with the largest sums going to Jordan, Ethiopia, and the top recipient, Ukraine. 10 NGO leaders in Ukraine telling Reuters they were left scrambling on Thursday after the U.S. suspended funding as the Trump administration urged staff in an internal memo to put America first. We have not been able to pay salaries since January 24, says Ivana Kostina, co-founder of the Ukrainian NGO Veteran Hub. Quite a few people are coming in. They volunteer. In Afghanistan, USAID has allocated billions of dollars since 2001, providing humanitarian assistance like food and shelter, as well as agricultural and educational support, according to an archived version of its website. Aid groups warning that without USAID, securing schooling for girls will be an uphill battle, since the Taliban takeover in 2021 blocked them from attending school past 6th grade. The agency has also invested in countries like Moldova since the collapse of the Soviet Union, helping to fund infrastructure projects, energy security initiatives, media platforms, democratic institutions, and NGOs, according to the Associated Press. The director of the independent media platform Moldova.org says many TV networks and outlets in her country are funded by Russia, so there needs to be a counterbalance. One plan appearing to survive the pause in funding, the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief, the world's largest initiative to treat HIV. Secretary of State Marco Rubio allowing the effort to continue under a waiver for life-saving humanitarian aid, though unclear to what extent.
You name it, AID is there. In the fight against HIV, in the fight to protect the Uyghur population in China, in the fight to protect refugees, in the fight to make sure that there's food security everywhere, AID is there. It is the lead development agency in the world. And no one elected Elon Musk to dismantle it.
Defenders of USAID say shutting down the agency would diminish the United States' influence abroad. The agency's branding giving it high visibility and popularity around the world, letting countries receiving aid know exactly where the resources are coming from. Some Democratic lawmakers say shutting down USAID would not only be a bad PR move, but could leave the U.S. vulnerable.
Make no mistake, this effort by Elon Musk and so-called DOGE to shut down the Agency for International Development is an absolute gift to our adversaries, to Russia, to China, to Iran and others, because AID is an essential instrument of U.S. foreign policy and U.S. national security.
Valerie Castro, NBC News.
Let's get you more international headlines now. Rebels are calling for a ceasefire in the Democratic Republic of Congo after a deadly week of fighting.
NBC's Claudio Lavanga has that and some other world news. Claudio, good morning.
Joe Savannah, good morning. Well, that's right. An alliance of rebel groups in the Democratic Republic of Congo have announced that ceasefire after heavy fighting over vast amounts of territories in the east of the country. Another group known as the Congo River Alliance includes M23, the rebels who seized the major city of Goma last week. The UN says at least 900 people died and almost 3,000 were injured in recent fighting between the rebels and government forces in the area. In their statement, the Rebel Alliance said it does not intend to seize any further territory and declared a ceasefire for humanitarian reasons. Let's go to Australia now, where on Monday a swimmer was attacked by a shark close to the shore and died of her injuries. The shark attack happened off Wurim Beach at Bribie Island, a popular destination for both locals and tourists. The police did not disclose the age of the victim, but Australian media widely reported she was a 17-year-old girl. Residents say sharks are common in the area, but they rarely come so close to the shore. And let's end this tour of the world in New York, where on Friday a violin made by the renowned Italian violin maker Antonio Stradivari goes up for auction at Sotheby's and could become the most expensive musical instrument ever sold. The auction house is estimating the value of the violin, which was made in 1714, at $12 to $18 million and could potentially break the previous record, which belongs to another Stradivarius, sold in 2011 for almost $16 million. And that's music to the ears for the New England Conservatory in Boston, which put up the violin up for auction. Back to you guys.
All right. Love that, Claudio. Thank you so much.
Super Bowl Sunday now just 5 days away. The party, though, is already underway in the Big Easy. The Philadelphia Eagles will try to capture their second ever championship. And, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs will try to make history by winning their third in a row. Louisiana native and NBC's own Kaylee Hartung is outside the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Maybe, yes. Kaylee, good morning. Good to see you. I thought you were inside for a second, but nope, you're outside.
Oh, we are outside. We are most definitely outside, guys. You know, the party never really stops in New Orleans. I think we all know that. The teams have made their way here. They're getting settled in. They will hit the practice field for the first time in New Orleans today. But last night, such a fun opportunity. The only time to see all of the players together under one roof inside the Superdome ahead of Super Bowl Sunday. So before they get down to business, there was some fun to be had.
It's the big game in the Big Easy. Super Bowl week is officially here. The two-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Philadelphia Eagles.
These are two formidable teams with formidable rosters.
The festivities kicking off in style at the Caesars Superdome. The Chiefs are looking to become the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls.
Just building that brotherhood and staff and front office and players all just working together for one goal.
Led by superstar quarterback Patrick Mahomes.
We just continue to work and don't make it bigger than what it is. Just play our best at the best moments.
And his top target, tight end Travis Kelce, who was asked about his girlfriend Taylor Swift's unmatched work ethic.
Yeah, I better hold up my end of the bargain, right?
Standing in their way, the Philadelphia Eagles.
There's been a lot of work put in to have these opportunities, and again, we just want to take advantage of it.
The Birds came up short against KC 2 years ago, but are coming off a blowout win in the NFC Championship, and are now led by a superstar of their own, who's playing in his first Super Bowl, running back Saquon Barkley.
All we want to do is win games and see each other succeed.
We just got to go out there, execute, and go make plays on Sunday.
Before the teams met the media in New Orleans, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell discussing a wide range of topics during his annual State of the League press conference, including the NFL's desire to expand globally.
Someday we're going to have an international franchise. And if we do, I think it would not surprise me at all if a Super Bowl follows and is played there.
New Orleans is hosting the big game for a record-tying 11th time. And this town is an expert at throwing a party, while giving a dash of Louisiana flavor to football's biggest game.
It's the 2 teams left in the National Football League, and it's great for the NFL. It's great for these fans.
Now, Joe, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there still getting their plans together for Super Bowl Sunday. Where are they going to watch it? What are they going to eat? But get this. One survey by the agency UKG says that 22 million Americans have already decided they're calling in sick to work on Monday, the day after the game.
Just don't do it today.
I'm guessing you and I will be on the clock Monday. Yeah, exactly.
Just don't call in sick today, all right? Kaylee, appreciate it. We know you'll be working hard all week long, all the way through Monday. Thank you so much. Coming up, a massive undertaking in Southern California that's giving new meaning to the phrase going for gold. After the break, we're going to take you inside LA's efforts to rebuild in the wake of those devastating wildfires as the clock ticks down to the 2028 Olympics. That is next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. Citi is sticking with a hybrid work schedule for its workers. CNBC's Samana Henao has that and some other money news. Samana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Yeah, so Citigroup CEO has told top executives the bank will continue to allow most employees to work remotely at least 2 days a week. Now, that bucks the return to office trend of other major banks, including JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. The Financial Times reports Citi CEO Jane Fraser believes more flexible work requirements give it a competitive advantage. Former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has been named Norway's new finance minister today as part of a government shakeup. Now, Stoltenberg, who is widely popular and respected, was the country's prime minister from 2005 to 2013. That's before heading the Western Military Alliance for a decade. His appointment brings an experienced negotiator and diplomat to Norway's government as global trade tensions are escalating. Norway's main exports, which could be subject to U.S. tariffs, include oil, gas, and fish. And Uber is rolling out new features that could make it easier for people with service animals. The company will now let handlers automatically notify drivers they ride with a service animal. The feature also includes a warning to drivers to avoid canceling rides or discriminating against customers with service animals. Owners can go into their settings on the Uber app and fill out an eligibility form.
All All right, excellent idea. Silvana, thank you so much. In Los Angeles, the long road to recovery leads to the 2028 Olympics. It has been nearly a month since those devastating wildfires ravaged the region. And with the largest fires now 100% contained, the city is now preparing to host the world's biggest sporting event. NBC News Now anchor Gadi Schwartz has more.
With the scale of devastation across Los Angeles coming closer into focus, there's growing questions on how to rebuild for a city with so much on the line. Thousands are just starting to pick up the pieces, and so is the city, with the clock ticking on several mega events, like the World Cup just next year, the Super Bowl in 2027, and the highly anticipated Summer Olympics in 2028. Former LA City Council President Paul Krikorian, who now heads the city's Office of Major Events, is hopeful amid all the loss.
This city is a city that has a record of coming back from difficult challenges. So it's part of our DNA to come back even from the most difficult challenges.
The city says their focus remains on healing and rebuilding, but they have no doubt they'll be ready to welcome the world for the World Cup and the Olympic Games. President Donald Trump touring the fire zone last week.
I just met with the Olympic people, and they're all set to do a real job.
That meeting right before Trump took office, signaling his support. The chair of the LA Olympics releasing a statement after, saying he is grateful for Trump's unwavering commitment to LA 28 and his leadership in bringing the Summer Games back to the United States for the first time in more than 30 years. The Games are expected to cost almost $7 billion. Primarily funded by the private group in charge. The last two Olympics in LA both turned a profit. If they go over this time, taxpayers will be on the hook. A costly expense for a city now strained by the cost of the fire.
The question is, will we do the Olympics in a way that benefits Los Angeles?
Former City Councilman Mike Bonin, who represented the Palisades and voted for the Olympics to come to Los Angeles, expressed some concern as the city begins to look forward.
A lot of public officials are rushing to proclaim that we are going to rebuild. We are going to rebuild exactly what was there before, and I think they're sort of rushing to action.
One early estimate says the cost from the fires could be as high as $275 billion. Whatever the final amount shakes out to be, the scale is almost unimaginable.
Nobody ever imagined an entire community, more than one community, would be wiped off the map. This moment that Los Angeles is going through now is profoundly wrenching, and I don't think that we're quite fully cognizant of how deep and how big this moment is.
But through the devastation, the Games could unite the city. Like in 2011, when Japan eventually rallied the country with a bid for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics after a devastating earthquake and a tsunami that ravaged much of eastern Japan.
It is an opportunity to really unite with the Olympic spirit and put our best foot forward before the world. It'll be a story of coming back from disaster to creating a phenomenal success.
Only time will tell how LA will come together as the city prepares to host the world while still coping with unimaginable loss. Gadi Schwartz, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Now to a reunion between a Kentucky man and his best friend, all made possible by a drone. Man's dog, Sawyer, disappeared during a snowstorm and was missing for 2 weeks. Reporter Kirsten Foote from our Louisville affiliate, Wave, tells us what happened next.
Good boy.
Moments like these with his dog Sawyer are something Billy Newington doesn't take for granted.
Let's go.
It was just a few weeks ago when their future together was uncertain, when Newington's original dog sitter hired through an app got snowed in. The company was able to find him a new sitter.
That sitter would call us when they got to the house to talk about, everything regarding the dogs, the feeding schedule going out or anything like that.
But Newington says that didn't happen. Instead, he got a text saying the dogs were playing in the backyard.
I panicked and I said, "What do you mean about the back playing? There's no fence out there." And they were like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize." My guess is that they saw this fence here and just assumed that there was a fence around the entire yard.
The sitter was only able to track down Newington's other dog, Quinn.
Sawyer was long gone.
So he took to social media where word quickly spread. But being more than 4,000 miles away meant vacation turned into a full-time job of finding Sawyer.
I was basically trying to stay in 2 time zones at the same time with communicating.
2 days after he got back to the States on January 17th, Newington and a Lexington-based thermal drone company took their search to the sky.
They found him within literally 5 minutes.
Sawyer was curled up in a ball against a fence along Freedom's Way. Newington headed over that way while on the phone with the drone operator.
And I panicked, and even though I was told before, don't call his name because he's in fight or flight, he might run, I just panicked and said his name, and I didn't shout it, I just said Sawyer. And the drone people, I couldn't see anything because it was so dark, but the drone guys said, he's looking at you. And so I said, sorry, and he came running towards the fence.
10 days of panic and fear instantly relieved, all thanks to the help of strangers.
I can't even begin to express my gratitude for this community and everything they did to make it possible for him to come home.
What a cool use of a drone. Our thanks to Kirsten Foote for sharing that reunion. It's estimated nearly 10 million pets go missing in the U.S. each year. Thermal drones have increasingly become one of the top resources to help find them. All right, coming up, sky's the limit. After the break, our Craig Melvin introduces you to a black pilot who's breaking barriers in the world of flight, becoming the youngest aviator to fly solo around the world. Got that story for you next. Stay with us. We're back, and so is a TV classic that some 90s kids may want to sink their teeth into. That's right, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is back to, you could say, put another nail in the coffin with a reboot at Hulu. Sarah Michelle Gellar is reprising her signature role as Buffy Summers. Oscar-winning filmmaker and self-proclaimed Buffy fan Chloe Zhao is tapped to direct. This time around, the project will focus on a new chosen one standing against the vampires, demons, and forces of darkness. Just ahead of the announcement, Gellar posted a little teaser on Instagram, a selfie wearing Buffy's yummy sushi pajamas. Now, we don't have any details about when the pilot will drop, but it has been more than 2 decades since the beloved show's finale aired. And based on the comments under Gellar's post, it seems like fans are just as excited. Finally, this hour, some aviation inspiration as the first black man and youngest pilot to fly solo around the world. Captain Barrington Irving is paving the way for a new generation of flyers to dream big. So in honor of Black History Month, Today Show anchor Craig Melvin caught up with Captain Irving to talk about how he broke barriers and records in the aviation industry.
It's very serendipitous to be back here at the Intrepid. After flying around the world, there's so many kids, so many people reaching out.
What sort of reactions have you gotten from some of these kids?
Kids are like, oh man, we thought you were like 80 years old.
40-year-old Captain Barrington Irving landed in the history books in 2007, becoming the first black man and youngest pilot to fly solo around the world. We know that representation matters, and you meet a guy early on your journey who probably helped you get here.
I'm forever grateful to Captain Gary Robinson. I just wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him.
Captain Robinson was the first black pilot Irving had ever met, a chance encounter that changed the course of his life forever.
He approaches me and says, hey son, have you ever thought about becoming a pilot? That's where my journey in aviation began.
Irving turned down college football scholarships to go to flight school, using his pilot's license from the very beginning to inspire.
I said, what if I flew around the world to just inspire young people, knew nothing about setting records?
But how are you going to accomplish this record-breaking flight when you had no money?
Street hustle.
That hustle included not taking no for an answer. The scrappy kid from Miami had a plan.
Here you have this inner city kid saying he wants to fly around the world. They said, you don't have enough money, you don't have the flight hours, you don't have the skill.
With just basic skills, a few bucks, and big dreams, the 23-year-old pilot charted the course for over a year. He flew 97 days, over 145 hours, stopping in 13 countries.
I did this without any weather radar, without any de-icing. It was very dangerous. But it really speaks to just belief in a dream.
A dream he's sharing with thousands of children around the country, including his STEM programs, including this one, Flying Classroom.
What if I figured out a way to travel to different parts of the world? Show me what you did. And bring to life the very same subjects kids have to learn in school.
Teachers around the country use his filmed flight expeditions to bring science to life in class.
A lot of students, regardless of income class, they're seeking something. And I figured, you know what aviation did for me, I think it can do for others.
You ready to have fun?
Today, Flying Classroom landed in Irving's hangar in Opa-locka Airport in Miami.
So this is what I flew around the world in.
The third graders got a peek at Inspiration, the plane that made history.
Guess what? These were all the different countries I flew to.
Captain Irving's remarkable story is now illustrated in a new children's book, Let's Fly. Why now?
We want young people to dream again.
But a lot of airplanes, the fuel is inside the wings.
These 8th graders are learning how airplanes are built.
This is more hands-on, so it's super fun.
But wait, there's more. You start BITS, Barrington Irving Technical Training School.
Train them for 12 to 16 weeks and have an amazing career waiting for them. And that's what we did.
But to be clear, a lot of these folks, they're formerly incarcerated. They were experiencing homelessness.
That's who I want.
Why?
Those are the individuals that want the second or third chance in life.
You are living, breathing Black history. And then after you made the history, you kept on going.
The most beautiful part is when they turn around and say, okay, I want to give back.
Inspiring, empowering, and paving a runway where dreams can soar.
There's a difference between dreaming and pushing young people to their wildest dreams.
Craig Melvin, NBC News.
I like that, Craig. He made the history and then he kept on going. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.